And now your host, John Henry.
Welcome everybody to both sides of the conversation. Today's Sunday conversation, we are talking about the 5 historic slave rebellions here in the United States and across the world. Today we have some amazing guests with us. But before we get started, we want to give everybody an opportunity to start a watch party, share this information so that we can get it out there to the people. I think today's information is going to be very helpful for our community, for our youth, and for some of the people who may have forgotten some of the historic things that's taking place in our community. As we get started here, we definitely want to say to everyone, continue to keep your prayers for our co-founder, Rico Hamilton, prayers for Jada as she is going into a major endeavor and going to do some amazing things for us here at both sides of the conversation and for our community. So just keep them in your prayers today. Before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and go over our community standards for today. Both sides of the conversation is providing a safe and honest space for open conversation. Please be respectful of that. Be respectful to all the panelists and hosts and participants. Healthy debates and conversations are encouraged. Please do not personalize anything with anyone. No name calling, no bullying, no trolling, no shaming is not allowed here at both sides of the conversation on our live webinars or even in our groups. Please be respectful of that. Your perspective is yours. It is not a prescription. You do not have to agree, but you must show respect. So with that being said, we're going to open up for today's conversation. I think this is something amazing. It's powerful. My blood is rushing. I'm jumping. I'm getting excited. This is very educational, very informative. I'm so happy that these sisters are here today to put this on, to educate our people here at both sides of the conversation. You know, this is what these Sunday conversations about. It's about having engaged conversation, not only with the people, but informing our people, giving them information and trying to give all of the things that we forget about, or we might not have been taught, or we might have been passed on and forgot about over time, to bring it back to life, deal with it. We believe through communication. There's a process of healing that could take place. And we also believe that historical information is very important to our community to help us move forward. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on the founders of We Remember, Miss Cairo and Natasha. They are here today to put on today's conversation. It is going to be amazing. So with that being said, I'm going to turn that over. But before we do that, I'll also have to say I'm here with our special administrative Asia. She is here today. She is riding with us today since Jada's not here and Rico is out. She's stepping in. So thank you, Asia, for being here today.
Thank you. And y'all, this is interactive. So let's not just sit around and just listen. Let's get involved.
All right. Let's take some breaks in between the Niner game and get involved, y'all. All right. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you guys, Cairo and Natasha, if you guys like to introduce yourself to the people and let them know what we have going on today.
Cool. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Natasha, and as John said, I'm the co-founder of We Remember along with Cairo. And just a little bit about what We Remember is we are, our long-term goal is to create travel abroad type study programs where people could learn Black history, learn Afro-diasporic history. But in the meantime, since we're all under COVID, we've had to put some of our research on pause. And so what we've decided to do is to take some of the research that we've learned and condense it and transport it to this virtual world. And so that's where the birth of this slave rebellion curriculum came from today. It came from the fact that we were in New Orleans, we were in the Caribbean, we were down south, we were all over the place. And in doing the research for our program, we learned a lot about slave rebellions. And so we thought this was an appropriate curriculum to put together in this time of social unrest. Cairo, you want to add anything?
Yeah, just what Tasha was saying. We've traveled, and there's so many different rebellions and revolts that have happened across the African diaspora, but to try to condense it into 5, was difficult. But I think the 5 that we've chosen and wanted to share are some good rebellions, and they're different, and so we're going to highlight 5, which are Harper's Ferry Rebellion, Denmark Vesey, Christmas Day Rebellion, which was located in Jamaica, Nat Turner's Rebellion, and the Haitian Revolution. And so those are the 5 that we're going to highlight today.
Cool. So should we go straight into the presentation?
Yeah, let's go straight into it. I know you guys got a couple of videos, and yeah, let's go. Let's jump into this.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to show you, there is a presentation about these 5 rebellions. I'm going to show you some clips with a brief history of the rebellions and some keynotes, because we have a little game after this presentation. So please listen in. And here we go with the presentation. So the first rebellion we're going to talk about is the Christmas Day Rebellion. So some key notes to take away from the Christmas Day Rebellion is that Samuel Sharp was a Baptist preacher and was preaching about the need for freedom from slavery. Also, at this time, the British Parliament began discussing the abolition of slavery in 1831, and Sharp followed the conversation through newspapers. He made sure his congregation was aware of the arguments about the slavery of abolition. In December 1831, Sharp began a protest after his belief that the British Parliament had granted freedom to Jamaica, but the local planters had ignored it. With the Christmas Day Rebellion, many enslaved Africans agreed not to work and to demand freedom from their plantation masters. So with this rebellion, this started off as a strike, which then led to a rebellion. So these are some of the key notes taken away from this rebellion, which happened in Jamaica. And so the next rebellion we're going to talk about is the Haitian Revolution.
Hey Mom, what are you up to?
Putting up the tree.
We haven't decorated the house yet. I just wanted to make our first Christmas.
A man of perseverance, pride, and power, Toussaint L'Ouverture was the leader of the Haitian independence movement during the French Revolution. Born and bred in Haiti to enslaved parents, on May 20th, 1743, Toussaint was granted his freedom in 1777 at the age of 33. A sudden slave revolt in the northern province in August 1791 found Toussaint uncommitted, but he had a change of mind after hesitating for several weeks. He soon discerned the ineptitude of the rebel leaders and scorned their willingness to compromise with European radicals. With this knowledge, he began collecting an army of his own. Toussaint led enslaved Blacks in a long struggle for independence over the French colonizers, abolishing slavery and securing native control over the colony Haiti. He later invaded Santo Domingo to free the slaves there as well, and wrote a constitution naming himself governor for life that established a new polity for the colony. Toussaint L'Ouverture played a significant role in what was the first attempt by an enslaved population in the Americas and the world to throw off the yoke of European colonialism. He defeated armies of 3 imperial powers, Spain, France, and Great Britain. The success of the Haitian Revolution had enduring effects on shaking the institution of slavery throughout the New World. Toussaint's accomplishments remain visible to this day. His valiant life is symbolic of the fight for freedom and the change one man can make. We celebrate him for his contributions to our history in Black.
So the Haitian Revolution lasted 11 years. So there's so much information with the Haitian Revolution. So we kind of wanted just to highlight Toussaint Louverture. And so with Toussaint, just to give you somewhat of a just a little background, on August 22nd, 1791, the enslaved of Northern Saint-Domingue, which is now known as Haiti, organized and planned a massive rebellion. Boys Cayman was the site of the meeting on the night of August 13th, 1791, and in the northern mountains of Haiti. The ceremony was historic because it was said to be the ritual that was performed to overthrow the French rule in Haiti. In the 1790s, Toussaint Louverture, a military leader and former slave, gained control of several areas and earned the initial support of French agents. He successfully led the Haitian independence movement and established an independent state under his governance for a short period. In 1804, the island was declared independent. So the next rebellion we're going to talk about is Nat Turner's Rebellion.
This is the story of the cult favorite, best-selling, waitlist-inducing Always Pen.
I was ordained for some grave purpose in the hands of the Almighty.
Nat Turner was an enslaved African-American preacher who was born in 1800 and led a large-scale rebellion in 1831.
Nat Turner's ultimate goal was to end the system of slavery. So he chose violence as his only option. And that option, painful and bloody as it was, shook up the system.
Nat Turner was a mind-blowing experience to white culture and changed the game in a fundamental way.
They vowed before they started the revolt that they would kill every white person they saw, men, women, and children.
They were done being dehumanized, they were done being treated as property, and they just rebelled.
The rebels followed kind of a zigzag path. They stopped at most of the houses along the way, killing the slaveholders and their families who they found there.
The judgment of this court is that you are to be taken hence to jail, thence to the place of execution, and be hung by the neck until you are dead.
Lynching in America were spectator sports. There were spectator events. People came from miles around, and bodies were dismembered. When people went to these kinds of affairs, they wanted to take a souvenir away that proved to everybody that they were there and that that person, that monster, is now no longer alive. And how do I know that? Because I've got a piece of his body right here.
So takeaways for Nat Turner, keynotes. Nat became a fiery preacher and leader, claiming that he was chosen by God to lead the enslaved Africans on his plantation to freedom. Also, Nat was convinced by an eclipse of the sun in 1831 that the time to rise up had come, and he enlisted the help of 4 other enslaved men in the area. Turner's plan was to kill the area's main slaveholders and their families, picking up supporters along the way, and seize guns and powder from the armory in town. The rebellion inspired the Virginia slavery debate that occurred during the 1831-1832 session of the House of Delegates, and it is considered one of the first significant strides towards the Civil War. Next up is Denmark Vesey.
Denmark Vesey was born in either Africa or the Caribbean between 1767 and 1770. He was the personal slave of Joseph Vesey, who was the captain of a slave trading ship. In 1783, Joseph and Denmark Vesey settled in Charleston, South Carolina. In 1800, Denmark Vesey won $1,500 in the lottery and bought his freedom for $600. He tried to buy his wife and children's freedom too, but their master refused to sell it. After becoming free, Denmark Vesey opened up a carpentry shop in Charleston. He became quite successful and was looked up to for his success and ability to read, write, and speak several languages. Denmark Vesey hated seeing other African Americans being mistreated and looked down upon. He would tell the blacks around his shop, "You are as good as any man." "We are slaves," they would reply. "And for saying so, you deserve to be enslaved," he'd fire back. "You will remain slaves as long as you believe you are." Denmark Vesey began to plan his rebellion in 1821. He was inspired by his hate for the inferiority of blacks, his successful revolt in Haiti in the 1790s, the Bible, the closing of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and the fact that his family was still enslaved. Denmark Vesey carefully chose his co-conspirators for the rebellion, which included Peter Poyas, Gola Jack Pritchard, and Monday Joe. Vesey used his respected position as a successful freeman and leader of the African American Church to organize the revolt. He often used the French and Haitian revolutions, the Bible, and U.S. congressional debates over slavery to support his cause. The revolt was cunningly organized in a way that would make it hard for it to be discovered. All slaves were separated into individual groups called cells, and each slave would only know the plan and the people involved in their cell. The purpose of the cells was so that if a slave turned in their rebellion, they could only betray their group. At its peak, about 9,000 slaves and free African Americans around Charleston were involved in the plan. Denmark Vesey's plan for the rebellion was to set fire to the governor's mills and capture the arsenals, guardhouses, powder magazines, and naval stores. As the whites came out to stop the fires, the rebels would slaughter them and then go into their houses and murder their families.
So what's interesting about the Denmark Vesey revolt is that it never transpired. And so in 1822, Vesey organized the most elaborate, well-planned out slave insurrection in the history of the US. If it had succeeded, it would have been the most violent revolt. Vesey's plan was on July 14th, 1822, he and his co-conspirators and recruits would steal weapons from Charleston's arsenals and guardhouses, distribute the firearms to enslaved Africans who came from surrounding plantations to take part in the revolt, kill the governor, proceed through the center of Charleston, and kill the white people who were out and set fire to the city. But in June of 1822, several nervous slaves leaked the plot to their masters, and Charleston authorities began arresting leaders. Vesey was captured on June 22nd, and he and his co-conspirators were brought to trial. Despite torture and threat of execution, the men refused to give up their followers. And the last rebellion we're going to highlight is John Brown's Rebellion.
On Sunday evening, October 16, 1859, John Brown and 21 followers took armed possession of the federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. They intended to confiscate rifles and launch a massive slave insurrection to free the nation's 4 million slaves. Reactions to the raid were varied. John Brown was like the best of those who stood at our bridge once, on Lexington Common and on Bunker Hill, only he was firmer and higher principled. Henry David Thoreau. John Brown's martyrdom, if it shall be perfected, will make the gallows as glorious as the cross. Ralph Waldo Emerson. John Brown was a blood-stained fanatic. Nobody was ever more justly hanged. His raid was a preposterous miscalculation of possibilities. Nathaniel Hawthorne. John Brown's effort was peculiar. An enthusiast broods over the oppression of a people till he fancies himself commissioned by heaven to liberate them. He ventures the attempt, which ends in little else than his own execution. Abraham Lincoln. Brown was already known as an anti-slavery activist. In 1856, settlers in Kansas were battling to determine whether the territory would become a free or a slave state. At Potawatomi, Brown led a group that brutally murdered 5 pro-slavery settlers. In the Northeast, Brown collected money to fund an invasion of the slaveholding South. His principal supporters became known as the Secret Six. Brown targeted the federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry, partly to protest the federal government's tolerance of slavery. On Monday morning, local residents awoke to what they thought was a robbery. 4 civilians were killed by Brown's men. Others were severely wounded.
John Brown's Harper's Ferry raid. So John Brown's plan was to organize a slave rebellion in the South. With Harriet Tubman's contribution, Brown began planning an attack on slaveholders as well as the military armory at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. Brown's attempt was to help lay groundwork for a slave revolt. John Brown was also friends with Mary Ellen Pleasant, who was a wealthy businesswoman here in San Francisco, and used her wealth to help fund Brown's rebellion. Part of the plan included providing slaves in the area with weapons of pikes and rifles. Brown believed that these armed slaves would then join his army and free even more slaves as they fanned southward along the Appalachian Mountains. And Brown was hanged on December 2nd, 1859. Within 1 year, the first Southern state would secede from the Union. And so this diagram kind of gives you an idea of how these 5 rebellions and revolts are related. So with the Haitian Revolution and Denmark Vesey was inspired by the Haitian Revolution, and having to highlight once again, Haiti became the first free nation. And the Christmas Day Rebellion was the largest rebellion in the British Caribbean, and Haitian abolitionists fled to Jamaica during the Haitian Revolution. So there is the tie there. As far as Nat Turner and Denmark Vesey's revolt, both Nat and Denmark Vesey were preachers. And Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey, and Harper's Ferry, those 3 rebellions all had in common were the seized arsenals, armory, and firearms. So this kind of gives you a little diagram of how some of these rebellions interconnect with each other.
And just to chime in, like that image there, we share that because, you know, a lot of people will describe some of these rebellions as unsuccessful, such as Denmark Vesey's, right? Like people were like, well, because it didn't kick off, like how could that be successful? But if you look at Denmark Vesey's rebellion in 1822, what are the chances that you think that Nat Turner didn't learn something in 1831 in South Carolina based on what Denmark Vesey did? And so there's kind of this continuum where there's this belief that our resistances sometimes are quashed and they're dubbed unsuccessful, but the truth is they give a lot of raw material for the next person to learn from and eventually become more successful. This is just a suspicion of mine, but I kind of believe that Nat Turner probably was like, let's not organize all the Black people in South Carolina, like, you know, not all, but like Denmark Vesey was, you know, it said at the height of it, 9,000 people were involved. If you look at Nat Turner's, he only had 5 people who knew about the rebellion when it started. That was probably a teachable moment for him. Like if 9,000 people know, it's just too risky. Like, let's just do what we can, cut some heads off, keep it moving.
So can I jump in there? And I want
Of course.
So is it fair to say the actual push came from America into Haiti? Because the timeline kind of shows 1822, and then it kind of led. So do you think that there was some kind of communication or some kind of information that was getting down to Jamaica and Haiti?
Absolutely. Like one of the things you got to look at, like Haiti was actually the first one that The
happened.
oldest one, we should say. Like Haiti happened in 1790s. But what you got to realize about that time is that a lot of people were being shipped back and forth between the Caribbean and the South. And so when you read you know, on Denmark Vesey's life, he was actually temporarily like enslaved in, I believe it was Haiti, but it was in the Caribbean. Okay, in Haiti, thanks, Kai, for a while. So he knew the temperament, or if you look at with the relationship between New Orleans and Haiti, a lot of people in New Orleans have ancestry in Haiti, and they, you know what I mean? They had ancestors who were involved in the Haitian Revolution and brought that information here and vice versa. And one of the things about Denmark Vesey's rebellion is, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I'm just gonna go ahead and say it since I started, is that he was looking to Haiti for support. Like in his mind, once his rebellion popped off, if it was successful, he was trying to take these ships and get people to Haiti, which was the only free Black republic at the time in the West, or get people back to Africa. But it wasn't like this, let's stay here. That wasn't the agenda.
Yeah, it was a movement before Marcus Garvey.
I mean, we've been moving since we got here, right? Like, and that's the fallacy they want us to believe, is that every time we start a movement, it's new. And it's like, no, it's a continuum since day one.
Well, and then we're talking about, this is just 5 we're talking about.
Right, just 5.
So it's not like, oh, these are the only 5 and, you know, time frame. There was a lot more going on. So again, that story of, hey, okay, this worked over here, this didn't, this is how we organize, this is how, you know, we need to get, because some of these, it also was not just slaves, there were other people involved. There were abolitionists.
Right. Abolitionists. Mm-hmm.
So they, or like free, I was reading on it, like, you know, free mulattoes, and it was in Haiti?
Haiti, yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so it wasn't just, okay, just the enslaved people, you know, there were other people involved as well. So again, getting those stories and hearing, okay, this worked here to here to try to make these rebellions happen and be successful.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because the takeaway there is that everybody has a place. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? A lot of times, and we still battle this, right? Today, it's like, there's only certain people who the movement is for, or like, the more oppressed you are, the more down you are. And it almost takes like the humanity out of it for people. What it does is it takes out the accountability for all humans to be able to be like, that's just wrong. I don't care if we're in the 1400s, the 1800s, or 2020. Wrong is wrong, and I'm not down with that. Granted that obviously there's like environmental and social constructs that give us our, you know, ability to see things clearer, but it's not necessary. And that's what, you know, that's what I hear you say when you say that. There were a lot of free people of color who were like in the video that Cairo showed, although Toussaint started out enslaved, he was a free person of color. And it said that he was on the fence about, how do I feel about rebelling? Like today we celebrate Toussaint as like one of our leaders, Free Black Republic. Like he is the most pro-Black symbol that we have. But if we're honest, dude was on the fence for a minute. Mm-hmm. You get what I'm saying? Whereas you look at John Brown, who was a white man, he was never on the fence about it. And it's not a judgment, it's just a reality. It's just truth.
Yeah.
Yes, I just want to jump in there real quick, because Rico, I guess he's in and out. He was able to catch a little bit, and he had a couple questions. And then we had one of our members say that they have a series right now on HBO about John Brown. So that's pretty informative to people. If you have HBO, check out.
Write that down.
Brown.
Yeah, good to know.
I know we're going to get to it, but Rico asked, how are these revolutions or revolts related to the day movement? Can we ever get close to this type of fight? I don't know if y'all want to hold this till y'all get through, or is this something we can answer now? That was from our co-founder.
Okay, ask the question again. Sorry, I was just trying to take that note on, and none of my pens apparently work on the HBO series. But go ahead.
So they said it's an HBO series about John Brown. That's on HBO. And then Rico asked, how are these revolutions or the revolts related to today's movement? Can we ever get close to this type of fight? So I guess what we're learning about today, where we at today in 2020, how could we get close to this type of rebellion today, which we already know is starting to happen, but how do we get there?
And I would say that we're there. Like, that's the fallacy that we're not. Like, there are prison abolitionist people. There are people who are solely committed to abolishing prisons because of its roots of an enslavement. Like, there are anarchists today. You get what I'm saying? Or like, if you even look more recently in history, you know what people dubbed that period after the civil rights movement, and the Panthers, they were blowing stuff up. Like, Mandela went to jail because he was blowing up government buildings, people. Like, we're not that far. We just don't have the information. The media tells us this stuff is not happening. And so one thing that came up during the last time we did this presentation was the quote unquote looting. And I'm gonna say quote unquote looting, right? Because the concept of looting in a lot of ways is even a fallacy, in my opinion. But people were saying, you know, there was this pushback in the media, like, it's not Black people doing it, it's white people doing it, it's other people. And to some extent it was other people. And to some extent it's us, y'all. Like, that's what, like, and that's this whole conversations. We turn up in so many different ways. Like, some people are going to go the NAACP route, and some people are going to be like, look, I'm burning down that building, and there's precedence for me burning down that building. And it may not be strategic, it may not be smart to you, but it's what, you know, Mandela and them did. It's what, you know, a lot of civil rights activists did. It is what these people who laid slave rebellions did. And we knew we weren't going to get much more accomplished besides burning down a building, but we burnt it down anyway.
And to chime in, my question is it because what we're seeing as resistance doesn't look like it did then? That's the thing. It looks different, but it's still happening.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, just watching those films, you know, my blood is like, I'm like, I'm radical, right? But then when I look at these things, it's all kind of related to today. Like, soon as you see the Bible, it just goes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you see, you know, the different things that was going on, and then people like telling the masters what was going on. I mean, it's all related to the day, right?
It's so prevalent.
The police, they're going to organize a protest over here on this street, or they're going to close down the bridge. So, like, it's kind of amazing how they had to strategically do it. And like you said, some people, I mean, you know, for him, it was tell 5 people, some was 9,000. But I think to Natasha's point, you know, John Brown being a white man, and I think in the Black community today, you know, with all that's going on with protests, the uprise and the unrest, we have to understand this history, that it was white people who was on the side of us that was riding just as hard as we riding. Because sometimes in our community, you know, I hear people sometimes we go into protest, they like, oh man, all the white people need to get in the back and let us go forward. But sometimes you got to let the allies do the pushing, and we do what we got to do. So I think it is very important to take this information from a historic standpoint to apply it to today, because them same regions from the original time these things have taken place still suffer from a lot of this historic stuff, right? And I almost sometimes like its purpose, because the media and the people that are afraid of the uprising don't want people to know about it. And these regions are still being affected today. I mean, you look what's going on in Carolina, you look what's going on in Kansas, you look what's going on in Haiti, the struggles, the same thing, but all that strength came from there. So it's pretty deep.
Yeah. Any other comments, or should we move on?
Let me look through the comments. Rico said we should overcome the movements. Yeah, so I know he's fired up. I know he want to be here. This is a conversation I know he want to be a part of. He said that's why we have Biden. So yeah, I mean, it's
what? Huh?
Pause.
That's from our co-founder. That's what he's chiming in. He's getting a little.
He just went there with it.
Yeah, I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready for that.
What are they gonna do with?
Yeah, what? He's the abolitionist, Biden. All right.
So continue on.
And look at me contradicting myself after I'm talking about it's a spectrum. There's spaces all over. I'm like, wait, what? No, but okay, yeah, fine, sure. Okay.
So we have an interactive
Rico,
game.
we needed that, Rico. Thank you. We needed
Look, I got lost for a second. I was like, wait, what's next?
I mean, you know, we'll see. I mean, we at this point where I feel like we on the breaking edge of something very, very, very intentional happening in America, especially in the African American community. But we do have to unify, and I think the uprising is, like you said, it's already started, but I think it's coming more, because I think, with all these uprisings came from a point where it was uprise or die, right? And with 40 million people out of work, next week, federal funding for 12 million people are out. As people get hungry, people get desperate. I mean, if you just watch the news stories across America right now, people are looting, running in stores, taking whatever they can to survive, right? I mean, you're starting to see it. So you push people back to the wall. They have no support. Even a righteous person, when they back against the wall. I mean, I'm talking to people right now who are struggling paying rent, paying home, mortgages. I mean, people are stressed out, right? And then on top of the pandemic, talking about closing everything back down. Yeah, I think we there. So how do we unite and get ready for the fight? I like the bottom Nat Turner. We got to get our firearms and get ready, because I think that's what has been lost over the years in the Black community, because of the violence. And I think it was a time where Black people was very pro guns and pro protection of the community and family. And over the time, because of the drug epidemic and violence, we kind of moved away from the gun part. But I mean, what's going on is like, hey, how we had to start protecting ourselves, our sisters. I mean, we keep hearing these stories over and over, repeatedly happen. This had a 15-year-old young man in Louisiana, Mississippi that was hung. We've had some girls come up missing. I mean, what are we going to do to protect our Black women in the community, protect our young people? And I think we have to get to the Second Amendment at some point.
And see, I like that you bring that up, and then I will take us into the Jeopardy, because as I was studying all these rebellions, and like we said, one of the ones we studied was the Christmas Day Rebellion, and how that actually started off as a strike, right? Like when I read that, I was like, wait, what? Like y'all enslaved, and y'all just like, you read about all these other people turning up, and you're like, wait, a strike? And then you're like, oh, AKA the Baptist War. Okay, like your initial thought is like, oh, these some indoctrinated people that they gonna strike, and that they gonna strike with their Bibles, right? And this is why you can't really judge where people are at and how they do their movement work, because it's like, although it started off as a strike, what you had was, what was it? I think 60,000 people. Is that, look at, I got the number somewhere. Yeah, thank you, Kyle. About 60,000 enslaved people. So that was about 1/5 of the population of Jamaica, of the enslaved population, who end up being involved in this quote unquote strike, right? Like that strike met resistance. And when they started striking and the plantation owners and people started flexing, what they started doing, they started burning down plantations. But the goal was never to just take casualties. Unlike Nat Turner, they weren't just trying to kill all white people. It was the exact opposite. And that was impactful. What ended up happening is, after they had their rebellion, it was quashed. But, the next year, Jamaica, the British Empire, Jamaica was a colonial, still under colonialism at that time and part of the British Empire, ended up passing an abolition act. And so I say that to say, is real, like with the gun thing. So anyway, my point is, as I was reading this stuff, I was like, why are people so against guns? And one of the things I started reading about these personalities, because these are personalities, these are real people, right? Some of them did not want to compromise their humanity. Like there are people who are really like, just because you're violent, you are not gonna make me violent, because that's the equation of like you winning my soul. Like there's a lot of people who are like, you might take my body, but you're not gonna take my soul. And I think that's deep. Like, I think it's deep sometimes when I study some of these people who were committed to nonviolence, like when you peel back the layer, it really was in preservation of their humanity. And it got me to a place where I'm like, well, who am I to judge that? Like me personally, Tasha, you come for me, I'm fighting back. Like, I just don't understand. But I also understand where my humanity has been compromised because I live in this society. Am I making sense?
Yeah, but what about the religion aspect? Thou shalt not kill has set Black people back from doing anything, right? And a lot of these commandments in our historical churches have taught us to be more on the forgiving, submissive side of business.
Is it that? Are we forgiving because we really want to straight up, like, because we're like, we want to forgive white people? Or like I said, is it a preservation of my own humanity? Because let's be honest, like for some people, you open that door, like first of all, we're going to talk about scripture, right? So scripture predates people's interpretations of it. Like if you really want to go down the script, like, even one of the interesting things I learned stepping back as I was reading on Denmark Vesey's life, there was this whole thing about, was he you know Muslim, like, and they talk about how 10% of the slave population that came over from Africa, in fact, may have identified as, influenced by Muslim, the Islamic faith. And so they took that with them. And if you look at a lot of those Old Testament tenets, and you look at a lot of them Rasta tenets, you look at a lot of that stuff that we sit here and we're like, okay, that's pro-Black. A lot of that stuff is Old Testament stuff. And when you look at that thou shalt not kill stuff, that's Old Testament stuff. And so when we start looking at the religions and stuff, it's interesting to me as Black people how we glorify some stuff but we don't glorify others. But I'm like, it's all the same Old Testament. And then we're quick to be like, we was the first Black people, all that stuff is Black. And if that's true, that means those scriptures are ours. We were the ones. Nobody taught us that thou shalt not kill. We came here believing thou shalt not kill. We unlearned thou shalt not kill being here in the pursuit of self-defense.
I would take that. I think that's fair, but I think, yeah, I mean, you hear some of the stories. When a young kid was killed in the South, I don't know if it was in Georgia, and one of his friends that he was with wrestled the gun out of one of the racist dude's head. He shot his friend, and the gun went to him, and he said he couldn't shoot the guy because of his spiritual beliefs, and he said, I can't kill anybody. But the guy who was that just killed his friend actually shot him twice. He lived, but it was like, when do you like?
I'm with you on it. I'm not saying I do. You come for me, it's my instinct to come back. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that's me. All I'm saying is by reading these characters, I started to understand that, it wasn't this idea of like, oh, they getting punked, like that. It's so easy that we so easily label people. It's like, oh, they punking you, they playing you. I realized that there was something more to it for some of these people, that there was like a preservation of their humanity. And in that way, they were trying to preserve who they were before they were influenced by European colonialism and violence. And all I'm saying is I had to step back and kind of be like, okay, let me respect that a little bit more.
Because one thing is that regardless, I mean, I know you're enslaved and everything like that, but there is still, again, that humanity that like, I can't take a life. Like I may beat you up, but I'm not saying I'm gonna shoot and kill you. Like regardless, religion, you can say whatever, but just in the end, I mean, that's taking somebody's life. And they may have taken my family and everything like that. But I mean, I can see where somebody would be like, okay, let's try, maybe let's do it this way. Hey, maybe we'll all live at the end of this. Maybe we'll get through this and actually make a difference. Hey, Don, I mean, think about it. They tried it, right? They tried it as a protest and not trying to kill somebody. So you got to look at it in different ways, just like you're saying right now with everything going on and how, set fire over here, maybe silent protests over here, maybe online here. I mean, there's different ways and different approaches to everything.
All I can say is stay dangerous out there, my people. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I don't understand it. I get where you coming from with that, Asia, but I mean, it's just like when it comes to a mother protecting her kids, like at the end of the day, we got to stay dangerous out here. I mean, it's real. So I mean, I'm not for the violent part of having to kill, but I'm also like, hey, I got to protect my family. I got to protect my people. And if this is what's got to happen, it just has to happen. I mean, because if not, the other side of this, these Trump supporters and these right-wing conservatives, they wives and they family, they want to kill. I'm just telling you, I've watched these groups and these people, and they don't have not one thought of peace,
Yeah,
nothing.
they don't stand
They
peace.
like, if it's going down, we murdering. We
Yeah.
killing every black person. They don't, it's no fear over there. So
we don't always have to be like them, too.
Well, it's killed or be killed, as they say.
Right, and I think that's back to what H was saying, is that's the whole point here. It's not to say that I'm trying to convince nobody to be like me or unlike me. It's just understanding where people are coming from, because like I said, I'm not saying that I wouldn't, like, you know what I'm saying? If you come for my child, let's say I'm not coming even after you out of no self-defense. I'm probably coming back for you out of revenge, straight up. That's just my spirit. That's my soul. I'm half Russian, you know, all that shit. I got that in me. So whatever. But you know, I be telling people it's the black spiritual side of me that makes me come back to center. And so
I want to hear what Cairo had to say. She looked like she's ready to say something.
No, Tasha already knows. I'm about arming up. That's who I am. So I like to hear the other perspective. You know, I'm open to that because I can learn. But I do believe in what you just mentioned as far as Trump supporters, some of them arming up and protecting themselves. I feel like some of them just don't know peace. And a lot of, I don't want to generalize a whole white population, but this country was built on white supremacy and white violence. And so therefore, I don't think some of them understand peace. So me showing mercy and grace, I don't think I can do that. So that's my own personal opinion, but I'm very open to hearing the more spiritual side of things.
The both sides of it.
They dangerous.
So both sides.
But I'm staying dangerous, my people. I love, you know, I love peace, you know, and I love happiness, but I'm also a realistic, and I understand that. I understand as a black man, I understand as brown people in our community, the threat is real out here, you know, and I'm just staying ready, you know, I'm staying dangerous. So I support all of it, but when it comes down to the movement and my people, man, we got to do what we got to do. So I support all my sisters, my survival sisters out there that's arming themselves, protecting themselves, going to the range. Like, I'm at the range, I see so many of my sisters out there getting ready. I just love it. I get inspired because it's like, at the end of the day, if it go down, you can't call 911. I just hear so many people like, well, if somebody come to my house, I'm gonna call 911. Well, when we have civil war or a civil outbreak, it ain't no 911. Like, they not coming to save you. And I think it's more like that here in California. Like, I just came back from Atlanta, like in the Southeast, man, they ready. You know what I'm saying? They like
they have armed gun. They have gun clubs that are in preparation.
Yeah,
we don't have that here. Obviously,
I mean, it is gun clubs out here. I just thinking on the West Coast, we just more laid back. Like, oh, we just going to call the police. If I don't think it's going to get like that. And I think, you know, even this election season, if anything, California people didn't get out of this election season is this left coast, you know, far left progressive movement. If you look at how some of the legislative stuff passed, we not so left no more. I mean, we right down the middle, you know what I mean? It's a little left and it's a little conservative. And I think more people from the South with the gentrification has moved to California, to the West Coast. And I think a lot of their beliefs are starting to rub in if you just look at how a lot of the propositions pass and not pass. So I don't think we all so I don't think we so left, but you know, I just hope we get out of that comfortable mentality. I'm like Natasha, you know, I'm trying to stay dangerous, people.
So we could go two ways. I'm looking at the time, we're at 3:00. We had this Jeopardy game that we were going to spend 30 minutes or 25 minutes playing. We could do that, or we could just move on to the video clips and keep the conversation going. The game was supposed to kind of just bring out more facts about different slave rebellions and the different strategies and why we picked these fives, like go into more details. We can just kind of recap the details and keep it moving, or we can do the game for a little bit. What y'all think?
I can't. Hey, could you see in our group how many people is watching? I can't see how many. Let me see how many participants we have in here.
I mean, part of me says kind of how the conversation is going is let's keep it going. We can go
Okay.
facts. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
Rico in the chat throwing up stuff. No, we want to get that out. I mean, because there is a movement, there is feelings out there, and I think we're starting to touch on those.
Right.
And what do you think, John?
Yeah, I think I mean I see like two people on the Zoom. I mean, there's people saying stuff in the chats, but it's not a lot of people.
It's cool.
Let's just keep going then. Let's play the other video and then we can kind of touch on some of it.
Okay, I'm just gonna kind of run down the slave rebellions then, like the differences, the kind of similarities and differences that between the 5 that we picked. So the conversation that we're about to go into makes more sense. So some to kind of expand on the slave rebellions, like we talked about how Turner's rebellion was 4 or 5 people. He didn't bring a lot of people into it. It was a faith-based person. He was a preacher. He was thought to have like this gift of prophecy. And the reason why we bring that up is because in our movements today, we are so critical of the church. But if you look at a lot of these movements, Nat Turner, Samuel Sharp, John Brown, all people of deep church convictions. Vesey, member of AME Church. You get what I'm saying? The only one where there weren't like these ties to Christianity in their actual rebellion was Toussaint and the Haitian rebellion. They were committed to, you know, their ancestral practices. Boy Came On, the ceremony that they had when they started their rebellion was a voodoo ceremony. They were like, if we gonna win this, we got to bring all the spirits in. And you know, they had their high priests, both male and female, lead them. And then that night after their after the ceremony at Boy Came On, did they go turn up and win that you know, that 11-year revolution. And so we just throw that out there to be like, in our modern day pro-Black selves, kind of like we were just having the conversation right now. Well, wasn't that white Christianity? And we talk about so much why we take to like their religion. And in some ways we do. I'm not being critical that we don't. But when I looked at these people, I was like, we were spiritual people before we got here. And a lot of that Old Testament stuff was ours before it was ever theirs. And so at some point, we're not stupid. Like at some point, the stuff had to resonate with us. And I think that these rebellions show how it resonated with us towards our freedom, not towards our oppression. So that's one thing that we kind of want to highlight as a similarity. You wanted to say something?
Well, question, because I did a little research there, and with Denmark Vesey and AME Church, wasn't that South Carolina? Wasn't that the church that got shot up?
Yes.
Yes.
You think that like, you think that maybe like paralleled? I mean, to target a church, but target to that church with that history in it, I find that pretty interesting.
Right. Yeah. No, I realized that too. I was like, that wasn't no coincidence. No. And that's why it was interesting when that happened. The framing of it was like, went to a random Black church and sat in a prayer meeting. I'm like, we need to do some genealogy, because I'm not that this not sitting right with me. Was this one of his ancestors like murdered by, you know, these, you know, I'm just gonna call them Black revolutionaries because that's what a slave person participating in the slave rebellion was at the time. Because I'm just not, that ain't nothing was random about that.
Right. I mean, I hate to really talk about a lot of it because I know I always get thrown into the whole John, you're a conspiracy theory, but I also think that part of that movement, government, these historic moments, like in American history, when things happen, 9/11, there's certain prestigious days that represent that, you know? And I think part of their teaching in some of these white supremacy cults and different things that they do, they teach this history. So they know the things that is going to inflate reaction from the Black community, you know? And again, if I was at the service and this dude coming in here and we having service every night and this is not normal, I'm gonna be a little suspect. But again, in our community, we have become so forgiving, so open, so loving that, you know, our focus. And
have we become, or were we always that way?
I think we become more. I think we become more. I think like in the past times where we knew that it was Black against white, even in Martin Luther King time, I think people are more aware, right? And I just think as Americans, we have become so comfortable with our lifestyles. We have been comfortable with our jobs, the benefits of the things that we have become too relaxed.
And my question is, do you think we're blinded by that then? Are we
Yep.
blinded? Mm-hmm.
I think it is. I think that's what it is, because that's what helped, derail some of the Black unity, because now you could get more into the self-identity and not the community. So as we give you homes, as we give you cars, as we give you opportunities, as we give you degrees, you start to isolate yourself from the people. So
of community.
Separation is part of the conquerorship,
But that's not new, because once again, when you look at these rebellions, and this is why we're talking about them, is for that exact same reason, Denmark Vesey, he only allowed like a few free people of color and house slaves in his rebellion. Like for the most part, he was like, no, we're not allowing house slaves and we're not allowing free people of color, because he just believed that they were more likely to sell out. There was another, like, I think that's why like Turner was like, we're just going to keep the rebellion small with a few people. But it goes to exactly to what you're saying, because when you look at Toussaint, like we said, in Haiti, he was a free person. I mean, he became a free person of color, and he was on the fence. He was like, I kind of got clout and with this, where I'm at. If I go all the way over to fight in slavery, I might lose all my privilege. And that was a very real dilemma for free people of color at the time. And so I guess I say that to say, is that, are we really that different? Like all the privileges and stuff we have right now, they kind of make us lightweight, like the bougie people we judge for not being down with the movement back then.
I mean, it's totally that. Look at all the large institutions, all of our large employment. Look at the lawyers. Look at all of the things, how we sell out our people, right? Because I don't want to lose this title. I see it all the time in the corporate environment. I know people in corporate environments, and that's all they talk about. Like, we have this Black person here in HR, in charge of HR, but they don't help hire none of the Black people. Or they don't go to bat for the Black people when they see wrong being done, because they don't want to lose that title, or they don't want to lose that position. So it's the same thing, and then, like you said, certain people from the house Negroes to the field Negroes, it's the same thing now that we have. Look at all these incidents of these rappers being killed, right? Are we really having self-hate, so much gang-related stuff, or how much is this driven by the federal government, the people that are seeing the movement and the progression of people, that's putting money in other people's pocket to take these people out? From Nipsey Hussle, they have all these CIA conspiracies and different things. You got to understand, as people start moving and uniting people, the fear, I mean, from Pac on down to like all these people, there is government agencies. I mean, Hoover said it best, the greatest fear to the government was, Black people united. So if all of our federal resources from COINTELPRO, we had the Black Panther people on here, systematically from the government has been set to destroy the Black community, destroy unity. Given the times that we in now, how much you think that is really playing into also what's going on from a different perspective, from just being a house slave to in the field? You know what I mean?
And that's another thing that I was thinking of, like when we were preparing this, I'm telling you all, reading all this stuff just had my mind blown, and I was telling Cairo this earlier this week, is like, last time when we facilitated that, this same topic came up, like in terms of us as Black people selling out because we get privilege, and are a lot of us like modern day, quote unquote, house Negroes back then, which is interesting, because even when you look at Harriet Tubman, it's like she was in the house too, right? And she defies all our stereotypes of who a house person would have been. And so when I started thinking about that, and then I started thinking about like Mary Ellen Pleasant, right? Like we talked about her a little bit. Cairo mentioned her at the beginning, but she was a woman of color who was born into slavery, or believed to be born into slavery, but she was very fair-skinned. She was freed, and then she came to San Francisco, and she passed, and she built a fortune here, but she used her fortune funding rebellions. So she like funded John Brown's rebellion. She funded all these movements, and she died broke. Like after emancipation, she spent her whole fortune just suing for integration here in San Francisco. And so at the same time, or Denmark Vesey, he was a freed person of color. He started out a slave and he became free. Nat Turner was a slave with privileges. Like, nobody believed that he would end up doing what he did because he actually escaped and he came back voluntarily, right? And so there's also a part of me that it's like a catch-22 when we talk about this bourgeoisie Black mentality or reality, because at the same time, a lot of these people who were like, we can't trust them because they're going to sell out because they're so comfortable, are actually a lot of our leaders who led a lot of these rebellions. And so I had to sit with that. I had to think about that. Like, what is that? And what came up for me is the issue so much about wanting to hold on to our comfort as much as it is not having a solid strategy that we believe in. Because, and I say that to say that all these people who led these rebellions, they were prepared to die. They knew death, like death was almost certain. And it brings up like, do you have to be ready to die to make social change? And if that's the case, can we fault people who actually want to live and decide that they're trying to find these other strategies? Am I making sense?
You make a total sense. I agree 100% with you. You can't be a leader if you ain't ready to die. That's just my belief. You got to be willing to die, because
die and be broke.
Yeah,
sleep outside. You ready to sleep outside tonight? You ready to lose your housing?
You have to. I mean, that's the only way. You have to.
I'm not trying to call you out. I don't know you that well to call you out. I'm just asking.
If I have to put on the line to survive, I got to do what I got to do. But I mean,
we see homelessness here in the Bay Area. Are we ready to go out and be under them bridges?
We might have to in a minute. It's coming to that. But I mean, I think, like you said, the comfort, I think it's the pain. You know what I'm saying? I think it's the pain. You know what I mean?
Speak more about that. I don't know what you mean.
Stand on that, because
So like when you said, is it our comfortness, right? That's part of it. But I think we don't pursue it because of the pain that's caused from it. Like you said, the potential of having to raise your family outside on the streets, or having to take a hit publicly. So our leaders is really not in it for them. It's just like this Black Lives Matter Foundation, right? You talk about the lady from San Francisco spent all of this money to free people. If you really look at the agenda of this Black Lives Matter Foundation, like, what are they really going after for Black folks? You know what I mean? So I always have an issue with that, right? So I'm like, Black Lives Matter as a slogan, what it represents, I'm all for it, but the foundation, I'm not there, right? So I get it. We out here taking down slave statues and racist symbols, right? But again, this foundation who has all of this money, right? And you look at who they're supporting politically, but they're not driving change that's really there to break up systemic racism. You get what I'm saying? So in the facade of things, hey, we're going to do something for police brutality, but we're really not dealing with the real systemic racism. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, but there's something missing in that chain of thought. That
like you mentioned pain. So where's that pain that you're?
The pain is the suffering. The pain is the suffering
that we suffer as a people, or the leader, the individual leader.
Yeah, the leaders, the people it's the pain that we suffer.
The drive.
Say it again.
That's the drive. The pain is the drive to actually be
there. Not push back, you're saying.
Yeah.
Like the pain is why it's not that we're chasing comfort. We're more resisting absorbing pain because we know that story all too well.
It's the trauma.
We're running from trauma.
If it was so good, why is everybody trying to get out the hood? We're trying to get away from that pain. So getting away from that pain, we're putting ourselves in a position of comfortness that also compromise our integrity sometimes, our character, what we believe in. That's that pain.
Okay, I hear that.
Well, one thing I have to say though is you talking about the person themselves, right? But when you read those stories as well, at the different rebellions, they also went after those people's families. They tortured their wives. They tortured, their sons. They killed all that. So when you decide to do it, and I'll pick on you, John, but think about it. If they went after your daughter, your granddaughter, you know what I'm trying to say? That they didn't have a real say in it. You decided to do it. You decided to do it, but now I'm up here getting tortured, killed, raped, and all of the above because they want to know. Turner's wife, they went after her. They tortured her, trying to figure out where Nat was. I mean, John Brown, his sons died in there with him. 2 died during it. And again, I don't know what else happened to the rest of them, but I mean, it's not just you. And that's where some of these leaders may feel and how they act, because it's their families are going to get targeted.
Well, our families is targeted anyway. You think
Right,
Oscar
but that's
Grant
the
family,
catch-22. I think
you think Oscar Grant family wasn't targeted? You think the other brother that got killed by the police family wasn't targeted? You know what I mean? Trumped up charges brought on them. I mean, if we had the mentality of those historic people as a black man, I mean, I think different, right? If the police, they kill my daughter, I got to kill that man. That's just me. I ain't going to court. All these people go to court trying to, we finna go to court and wait for justice. It ain't no justice. See, black people, we got to start being real too. It ain't no justice. The system is not justice for us. So as men, if we gonna kill each other in the streets on this gangbanging stuff, but we ain't gonna kill this man who killed our kid, I have a problem with that. Like, that's what I don't understand about these gangsters. Like, it was just a different movement, I guess, when I came up. Like, we didn't play that. It was different. Like, the police didn't come through doing a lot of the stuff that they do now. And that's what I'm saying. It's comfortness. Like, I'm not going to sit there and let the police choke my daughter out and I don't do nothing.
Do you think we're docile?
I think we are. I think we are. If George Floyd partners is standing there and you don't even try to run over there and tackle the police to get them up off them, we gonna die anyway. Because after they do him, they gonna do you too. That's why I'm always in stuff. I can't sit there and watch somebody do something to my sister and not do nothing. I can't sit there and watch somebody do something to my daughter and I'm just gonna sit there and take it. I can't.
And that's cool. Like, I mean, I'm saying, like, ain't nobody trying to convince you otherwise, but I think it's interesting that you had that much passion and you simultaneously really identified why people don't. Like, the way you identified why people don't and you described the pain, that was such a level of empathy that I guess I'm wondering, like, how do we become these empathetic leaders? Because I feel like one of the critiques of where we are now, and was really kind of like separating us from even being able to collaborate. Because let's be honest, we're not going to quote unquote unite the way we keep saying Black people unite. Like, we're not going to have the same agenda because we're not the same people. Some people, like you said, you're totally willing just to be like, let's go. And there's some people who are really driven by the pain and the suffering, and that's real and that's fresh for them. And we can't judge them for not being able to ride or die because they got to deal with their pain as human. And there's some people who are so committed to their humanity because, you know, they got them Old Testament vibes that it's all like, you have managed to stay authentically Black. You know what I mean? Like, when, just kind of a detour, like when we were doing our research and we visited some culture yards in Jamaica, we hung out with like a lot of Rastafari communities. And one of the things that just came to me is like, it is amazing to me how this group of people have preserved their nature, like their humane nature. It just blew my mind. And so I guess I say that as a leader and somebody who is down a ride, how do you build connections from an empathetic place with people who may not be ready to ride like you?
I mean, it's hard, you know, one thing about being a leader, it is hard to engage people and get them to be on the movement. And, you know,
well, on your movement, right? They're on a movement. They just not on your methodology of doing it.
But nobody's on it until it happened to them. You know what I mean? But then it's like the lawyers for Breonna Taylor. You know what I'm saying? The grief, the pain this mother feel. You know what I'm saying? Knowing that these police go get off her, but 3 days before they give her the money, right? So they got the money. So you already knew where it was going, right? But that pain that mother feel, that, you know what I'm saying? Like, she wanted to be another way. But again, when you got these lawyers and these people around you, like, hey, your kids is gonna be good, your grandkids is good, here go the money. Ain't no money that's gonna take it. That's why I said, no matter what people try to say her boyfriend was this, at the end of the day, when the police came knocking up there, he did what any man's supposed to do to protect. Yes, we lost a great sister in the process, but he stood up and did what he was supposed to do. But now the mothers, they going to court. Oh, we want the officers to be fired. It's not justice. So as a community, what do? Do we let this police officer still patrol our community? And we know who it is. The dude that killed George Floyd, he out at Walmart, you know what I'm saying, buying Oreos.
Right. But I think that's the question right there. And you just said it in terms of it's twofold, right? Because I think what happens with us is we end up putting a lot of judgment towards each other. Like it's real easy for people to be like, oh, look at the family and be like, oh, you took the check, right? But the real question is, I don't care if you take the check or not. Deal with your trauma, deal with your stuff, get your lawyers, don't get your lawyers, however you want to do it, because I have a deep level of empathy that you're going through some stuff that I don't understand right now, or maybe I do, but I would just do it different. But whether you take the check or don't take the check, that's not the issue. The issue here is, why are you still patrolling our communities? And that's an issue we can deal with or without you. And I think when I heard you speak, that's where we need to start really figuring out is, what are our real issues? Because if we tease out our real issues, we wouldn't be attacking each other so much. And I just think that's the issue of where the movement is right now, is we just attack each other about our strategies so much. Like, you so down, you not down, you too light, you too dark, you don't know what I've been through, you from the hood, you ain't never been in the hood, that we can't even begin to leverage each other's capacities, because we're just we got too many definitions of, like, we be trying to take away each other's black cards. Like when we was in Jamaica, it was really interesting because we was having conversations with people and we're like, y'all keep talking about the white people are oppressing you. Like, where are these white people? Because we've been all over this place and we've seen about 5 white people, right? Because we weren't like in the touristy, we was in the country, we was in the maroons, we was all over the place. And so they're like, what do you mean? There's white people everywhere. And I'm like, no, they're not. I'm the only white person I see and I'm mixed. You know, I hold my card. And so they were like, they're everywhere. And so we started being like, show them and like name them. And what they were doing was they kept pointing out light-skinned people who they felt sold out, and they would relabel them as white. And it was like, what is this need to identify whiteness? Like, what is there's this need to name whiteness and have proximity? And it's like, they're not white. That's a light-skinned person. They are a descendant of Africa too. And my point is that we do that too much. Like we get away from the truth. The truth is that we are descendants of the continent and of people who were brought over, you know, some who were brought over on the ship, some who were already here and just enslaved because they were here. But we are indigenous and we're descendants of the same trauma. And none of us have the right to tell one another that we are not Black, because that's just not facts. Secondly, sorry, not to be long-winded, and because once we can respect our identities as Black people, then we kind of got to fall back and be like, okay, so we're all experts on how we deal with our own trauma from this foolishness.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, and you said something, you touched on it a little bit where you said it wasn't no white people around, but I think what happened is over time, us Black people are the new oppressors of Black people.
But that don't make you white.
With the facade, no.
But it don't make you white.
To say white. Mm-hmm. So that's like the carte blanche card. Like, I'm really going to oppress you as a Black person under the facade that it's white people oppressing us. And that's become the reality. You see it in all of our communities. You see it in our nonprofits. You see it in our community leaders. We are the ones oppressing each other.
But if we call each other white, then we're not operating in truth. We need to be reminding each other, like, look, I know you got a little privilege, but the situation here is either whether you want to call it privilege or, like you said so eloquently, you know what I mean? What does it look like to look at some of these leaders of the nonprofits and be like, you're evading your suffering? You know what I mean? Like that was such an aha moment for me that you said, like, that just gave me a whole level of empathy of people that I've been trying not to judge. I'm not going to say I ain't been judging them, because I have. I just been trying not to. But you get what I'm saying? And so it's like, just because you have chosen to alleviate your suffering a certain way does not make you less Black. And I cannot say that, but it goes to the real issue, which is the questions like, just like, what is our duty to make sure these police officers don't get on the street? What is it my duty to remind you about who you are?
Right. No, that's real. That's deep. And Rico got his mic on. He was trying to ask a question. Let me see if I'm making him a co-host right now. I think he got some questions.
I thought I saw he was a co-host.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Rico.
I got it. What's up, y'all? How y'all doing?
What's up, my brother?
Chilling.
All right. You know, I had to chime in. You know,
You couldn't help it, huh?
Cairo and,
It's too good.
and Natasha. I know they was coming with some fire, so I had to, hop on. I love y'all. Good stuff, John, Aisha. Y'all doing some amazing work. But I had to tune in and give one question because, it's always about both sides of the conversation. So I know that we look at it in one perspective as white and black, right? Like, imagine if we took white and black out and we look at it only from the systemic issue point of view, right? Like, not saying our people are white, but are they systemically feeding the system that we are trying to fight against, right? So, like, my question is, we got so many fights going on, right? We got the police brutality, which has been going on forever. Like, forever we've been fighting against police brutality. And as we uprise, honestly, there really haven't been any real changes. Like realistically, like when we talk about laws, like we had millions and millions of people outside protesting George Floyd. Not one real law was passed to change nothing at all. Our allies, Black people, nobody got a law passed or changed at all. So my question is it that accidentally sometimes we fight against because I don't want to say that it's on purpose because some people just don't know. Like, I really believe that some people just don't know that what they're doing is causing more harm, right? So, like, do you think that, like, in this moment, like, how do we address the people who are causing harm in a way to where it doesn't come off like, because, you don't want to offend nobody. So, like, how do we address that and have that conversation? Because I think that as a people, like John said, we harm each other the most, but some of it is accidentally, right? Because, like, I was on the call with, like, some mental health therapists, right? We've been having so much trauma in our community, but all of them say they're doing the work in the community, but you don't see none of them when crisis come, ever. Like, you don't see none of them, right? So, like, how do we, like, have those type of conversations? Because I think that also play an issue too. Like, it plays the issue, but yeah, they don't. Then we say they doing their part. What part is that? In my opinion, if they following the social construct of white supremacy, if they got a degree, right? The degree is based on white supremacy. The foundation of it is based on that. So, that's just my question. It's like, how do we get our most educated people to understand that possibly the framework that they were taught contributes to the white supremacy oppression of our people? That's just my question.
I think that's a dope question. I'm gonna let Cairo and Natasha answer that. But to what Natasha said earlier, Rico, and I know me and you, we talked about this a lot, right? It's that meeting point in the middle, right? Because we have these highly educated people who feel if you don't have the level of education or the PhD or the master's degree or the bachelor degree, what you are saying or you communicating is not valid, right? That's one issue that we have. Then in the hood, on the lower spectrum, we have people who feel if you haven't been to prison, you haven't been shot, you haven't sold dope, or you don't have no street cred, your voice is also not valid, right? So now we got to get to this middle part, right? Bringing everybody here, and that's where the work starts, right? And to Rico's point, Black people trauma and mental health is going to be totally different than what we're subscribing to people outside of the Black community, right? And what our people that's educated in the mental health haven't figured out was they're going off their base assessment, off the research and the information that they've done, but they're not actually applying in our community the real traumas, the real fear, the real pain, and how to assert it, right? Because the disparity, and I talked about this before, is depression is real. Anxiety is real. Trauma from seeing your family and different members killed or something ill happen to them is real. But we also have a large part of that that's being diagnosed that we are not looking into that causes some of that, right? Because of the social economic disadvantages. A person that's depressed with no money can be super depressed. But if we engage that person and they have financial support, they might not be so in the mental health space. So it's kind of on the edge, but I just had to put that out there. But I'm gonna let Cairo and Natasha handle that question, Rico. But I think we're honing in on the real issue right there.
John, you know, you hit a lot of points, and all I could be is like, yes to the assessment, yes to meeting in the middle, yes. To tell you the truth, Rico posed that question. I have to sit with that. I really don't know. That's something that I think needs to really be taken in, because if we really want to see change and actually see something that's tangible, this is something you can't just automatically come out the gun with, and so I'm gonna punt it to Tasha to see if she even has something but for me, I have to sit on that because it's a good question.
So I'm gonna start with, that is why we are called We Remember. Straight up, no, because I was sitting here, y'all, I was just be taking notes on all the stuff you say. I'm a note taker, but because I love this. My mind just goes boom, 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 boom. But it sounds so cliche, but when we started this project, it really started from this place of wanting to do our own healing. It was a personal journey. It wasn't supposed to be a nonprofit, and it was really recognizing that we have been dismembered, right? Like colonialism, capitalism, being here in the West out of our element has really dismembered us and separated us from our identity and our nature as a people, which is why I keep bringing up those visits to those Rastafarian cultural yards and just how amazing it was to be like, I think this is the closest I've seen to people being in their nature, like our God-given creative nature. Like, as far as I'm concerned, every Black person needs to visit Life Yard. That's one of the culture yards we visited in Jamaica, or needs to get up to the Maroon territories in the Caribbean, because it was just it was addressing that dismemberment that has happened, i.e. we remember. And so kind of to answer Rico's questions, I am that person with all them degrees, right? Like I got the law degree, the JD, I got a tax degree, I got a master's in social work, because it has been my my life, journey, question, alchemist journey, whatever you want to call it, to figure out the answers to some of these questions, like what's going on. And so I'm very familiar with the idea that I'd be sitting in these classes and they'd have all these studies of this person from Harvard or this or that, collected this data. And I'm like, you mean to tell me y'all had to do all this to do what so-and-so's grandma been doing? Like, are we for real? Like, it was offensive. Like going to school, getting a formal education, getting all 4 of my degrees was actually a very offensive process for me, because I kept learning how much people do not give us credit for what we naturally and already do. And this is why I'm like, we have to remember who we are, because we see all our dysfunction, but we don't recognize our glory enough. Do you know how glorious we have to be to survive this history? That means something's working for us. There is something about, and I'm not trying to say it to sound cliche, it is true. We naturally organize, we naturally resist, we naturally have these methods of what other people call positive behavior supports, or, it took them 30 years to realize community-based treatment was better than institutionalized treatment. We've been known you're not supposed to take people out the community. Looked up the concepts of Ubuntu and things like that, where when somebody offends, they bring them right back in the middle of the village and they address it. Hold on.
Okay.
So the framework, to answer that question, he said framework to see how like how do we get people who are in this healthcare to figure out how they're contributing to basically the repression of the people they serve? Because we have a lot of educated Black people who are going through the systems, and they come, and believe me, I'd be the most frustrated when they come back and I'm like, that's the best you got, because I'm critical. I'm a Virgo. I'm critical as hell. And so I'd be and it's because they have digested these very Eurocentric, data-based, lettered ways of doing things, and not really knowing that they already know how we heal ourselves. We know how to do that. The reason why it's not working the way that we want it to work, or we're not getting the results, is because the level of repression that we're experiencing while we simultaneously heal ourselves. We're waking up every single day healing ourselves. We're also waking up every day inside a construct, a very white supremacist, Eurocentric, male-dominated construct that keeps moving us away from ourselves. So the question isn't like, how do we heal? The question is, how do you expect anybody to heal when they're constantly in the middle of this tension? We wake up every day to heal ourselves, just to go outside and be broken down again, to come back home at night to heal ourselves, to wake up the next day healed, to go back outside and be broken down again. That's basic ass science. We going like this. Ain't no way you coming out of this as long as you gonna just keep going like this. That's not a us problem. That's a construct problem.
So I wanted to jump in there because I don't want to let this thought go, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think that's the problem. Black people don't really know who they are. So when we're talking about history here, this is a history lesson for me too. A lot of stuff, I didn't get this in school. We have people in our community that don't even know the history of their own family. So we can't heal because we don't even know. We don't know where we came from. We don't know what tribe we from. We got the genealogy tests, people taking DNA, still giving them the wrong information.
I got the wrong information. They changed. No, seriously, I did my ancestry. They gave me 2 different results. The first time I was told I was from all these different tribes, and a year later I checked again. They're like, oh no, you're Nigerian. I was like,
so how we can't heal as a community because we don't know who we are. We don't even know our family constructs, right? Even in my own family, from the time of slavery to moving on, we've had so many transitions happen where family members took on other family members' kid and said that they was fathers and dad to hide for certain things. So it's so much information we don't even know, right? But to the
some
point
stuff we do know.
We don't know it, but
but some stuff we do, and that's what I'm getting at. When you go to these culture yards and you go to these places where people have preserved, while that may not necessarily be my heritage, there's some universal truths about who we are. And let me say that. Yeah, not just the pain. There's some universal truths.
Information. The pain. I'm not going as a young man in the community to go find out my true roots. If I was an orphanage, my dad was an orphan. He came from Nassau to America. The pain to go find out where we came from, that's too much, right?
That is a lot. But what I'm saying is the mental health experts, these people that we get in our community to serve our community, that we should demand that that's part of their job to do, is to help facilitate that, because we cannot be healed unless we have doctors, mental health experts, and all of that who are committed to helping us remember who we are. So yes, like, I can't expect a 15-year-old to try to figure this out. I can't expect, somebody who's been beat up by the trauma, somebody who's coming to me for services to figure this out. But as a service provider, it is absolutely my responsibility to know that part of my plan, my assessment, my, whatever biopsychosocial assessment. I really think we need our own biopsychosocial assessments for Black people, by the way. But it is part of my job to put that in your plan.
But do it work? If you just
I said is it works enough. Yeah, we're gonna go back and forth. I already addressed this. I'm like, it works, but you keep facing the repression. So it's twofold. Part of it is like, look, if you don't do the work at all, we devolve. Okay, so it works enough to keep us afloat. It works enough to keep our head above water. Are we being these miraculously healed people? No, because we live in this larger social construct. So it's twofold. One is, yes, we have to fight back against the system, but one is you can't expect people to fight back against the system unless they know who they are. Like, nobody who's not grounded can stand straight up.
But you just said the key word. We go to get healing. We go back to our communities. We get beat down. Mm-hmm. As Black man and Black woman, then you go home and you getting beat down. How do you heal?
Well, we shouldn't be beating each other down in our homes. Can we talk about that?
I'm just saying, we have all of our cities and counties spending excessive amounts over millions of dollars in mental health. But the results is not showing healing in the Black community. So is mental health really where we need to be investing our money?
Not traditionally. That is my whole point. If you heard what I said, the traditional framework, just like Rico said, no, it is not working because it's not a framework that's meant to align you with who you are as a Black person. It is a framework to help assimilate you to this construct. Everything we do here, the way we educate, the way we treat people, our doctors, is about assimilating you to a United States agenda, which is predominantly a white supremacist agenda, or not, well, I'm not even gonna say white supremacist, it's a white agenda. And they can use democracy and all that stuff. So, well, it needs to be that way because yes, you are the majority of the country. I get that you need to align your white people for your white agenda because that works for you. As a Black person, that shit makes me more sick. And I know this from experience. Like, this is why I resist this stuff. This is why I've studied it, so I can make sure I don't do it.
Right. So again, since we're talking to the community out here, you asked earlier, how do we make change? This is the conversation our community needs to have, because the people that's sitting at the table saying mental health, all the money goes to mental health, it's not working.
Right, because it's all about assimilation. Mental health in this country means about assimilating you. It means about treating you. Shut up, Rico. It means, like, you know what I'm saying? No, it does. It means about finding the right medication for your antidepressants. It's about helping you cope with their system. They have not realized yet that a lot of stuff about their system actually exacerbates our existence, right? Like, they don't realize that so much of what they do is trying to put a round peg into a square, square peg into a round hole. And that's what I'm saying. Like what you were saying earlier, I'm gonna come back to this. You were like, well, we don't know who we are. I don't know who my enslaved people are, this or that. I tell you this, we know certain things about ourselves, and it's not that deep. When we go to church, it's certain commonalities that come out. When we go to a party, it's certain commonalities that come out. What you hear Black people say all the time, oh, we just don't do that. There are certain things about us that we don't need to go 5 generations back into our ancestry to know about ourselves. There's a reason why we like being around each other and we don't like being around them sometimes, or we need a break from the system. It's because we do have some ingrained kind of code of ethics and ways that we operate that are us, that have been socially demonized, but there's nothing inherently wrong with them. And that's what I'm saying. When we went back to these culture yards, or when you go to spaces that are majority Black or countries that are majority Black, there's a reason why Black people get there and they're like, whew. It's because it's not that deep for us to figure out who we are.
I'm gonna let Rico answer. I'm not sold on that 100%.
Go ahead, Rico.
I'm gonna let Rico answer that, but I'm not 100% sold on that.
I'm kind of sold on it. Because I think it go both ways, right? I think that part of it is true, depending on you as an individual. But if we talk about the masses of people, it's hard for me to buy into that when the masses don't have knowledge of self. So the roots, what's that saying? A individual without knowledge of self is like a tree with no roots, right?
But my whole point here has been to help people remember themselves. Sorry, but I just got a point there because but that's been my whole point. It's helping people remember themselves. Okay.
I know, but most people who know some of their history, or who are like you, who look into certain things, most of those people a lot of them are grounded, or they become more successful. The individuals who don't know themselves, 9 times out of 10, most of those people fall victim to a lot of different things, right? So I think I think you're saying two things, in my opinion. I think it's a double-edged sword. I think that what you're saying is true, but then there's another side to it, to the individuals that, don't get those opportunities, because I think those opportunities is a privilege. You know what I mean?
But
like,
what
it's a
I'm
privilege
saying is
to be
when
able
John
to go.
is asking, where should those mental health dollars go? That's what they should go to, is what I'm saying. Is facilitating.
I know We Remember is the program it should go to, because
not
you
even
guys
just We Remember, but anything. All mental health professionals who work with Black people should be trained to help people. Yeah, I'm just saying.
Gosh, I know you ain't got to bully me, right now.
I'm not bullying you. I'm just saying
and we are
the same
trying to get
things.
away from this systemic oppression.
No, this is who we are as a people.
Right. Okay, but I do got a quick question, if it's okay, before I got to hop off. But I got a quick question, real quick. So, I heard you guys talking about the revolt and the revolution, that the 5 of them, the slave rebellion. So this is my question. Do you really think that Black people are scared? Or do you believe that we are only scared of the system? So that question is, are we really scared, afraid? Now think about all the violence that happened in our community. Are we really, really scared? Or are we trained to be afraid of the system? So that's why we really don't fight against the system, which you can also say white people or, police officers, or, that all falls in that bucket. So do you really think we're afraid, or is the fear of the system ingrained in our fabric? So that's my question.
Rico, great question. It's both. Black
I think
are afraid, and they also afraid because the system, the way it's systemically set up, is to make us afraid. So when I was in the streets, and I'm going to take y'all back years, it was like this. If somebody went and did a robbery, right? They would say, if you go rob that white person, they're going to give you double the time. But if you go rob one of your people, you might only get 6 months. So who am I going to do harm to? I'm going to go do harm to my people, because if I get caught, I'm going to do less time. So the same thing with the killings. I'm going to go kill you, one of the person that look like me from the same different community or whatever, because I'm going to get less time than if I go out there and I do something to one of these police officers or to one of these white people in the community. And it's proven facts. So the increased violence among us is because, one, we're afraid to deal with the system that's really oppressing us. And the issues that we really have, we don't want to press because the system is going to break it down on us twice as more. Perfect example with the gentrification of our community. Back in the days, if somebody came in our community and deal with some of these people that's coming in from gentrification, they was getting their stuff ran through, burnt out, moved out, they was going, right? But now they so afraid, they let these people not only cause ruckus in our community, shut down our community business, dictate the community, and nobody does nothing. So it's both. But yes, we are afraid.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's both as well. The system does play a role. And I think some folks in our community, not all, but some folks are scared. I mean, we go back to, sometimes it's about self-preservation, preserving our family, right? Going back to the leadership. Like, what can happen to my family if I were to take this role? I think they both, it's intertwined.
Question, do you see that? I mean, like some of these rebellions, right? You did them, but they didn't pay off right away. And I know, like right now, a lot of us are instant gratification, right? Like John was saying, okay, was it Rico? We're out there, George Floyd, ain't nothing changed. Well, guess what? Just like all these rebellions, nothing changed, the next day, 2 weeks, a year. It could have been 10 years, a decade later that there was actual change. And do you think that is part of it is that we don't see the instant change or don't know how this little thing will add to this to get to that change? So that's where I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to do it because it's just me or just my little group of friends, and not saying, okay, if we started here and then, like you did the diagram, right? This went to here and this to here, that they don't see that, so that they don't even start it to begin with. They don't even start it to begin with. They just said, okay, well, I'll just go to vote. I hope that the system does me right. I hope that people like John will go out there and just cause all the ruckus and make the change, because I don't see it right now. I don't see it right now. I don't see how it's going to be. I'm maybe 19 years old. I'm not going to get it. So why do anything?
but it's the fear of the uprising. See, what COVID also did is you got to realize after George Floyd, the reason why Nancy Pelosi and all of them came up with a police brutality bill, because of, like Cairo said earlier, because of the looting, because how people organize in every state, demonstrating, looting, burning down stuff. Because at the end of the day, the system only care about financial concerns anyway. So once the rich people started feeling the financial impact, it's like, hey, y'all better get something down, because not only is it here, it's growing outside of here. Y'all affect my business here. You get what I'm saying? So the real uprising is the unity. But to get the unity, you have to break the fear, right? Because the more we stick together, things will change, right? Because as soon as people start going there, and they know, when people start shooting back at the police, disrespecting the police, throwing bottles at the police, then they like, whoa, like it's getting out of control. We got to do something.
And it goes back to, I think, the conversation we kind of had, what, an hour ago? No, but I don't think we're innately fearful people. I think it boils down to that question, like, are you ready to die? And the truth is, for most human beings, the answer is no. It's not that deep. It's if I go out there, I'm going to die, or I'm going to go to jail, or I'm going to lose my life, or whatever. Am I ready to do that? And the answer is no. And I think the real question is, what is it that we're holding on to, or what is that trauma that has happened from, like you said, the pain so much that, we just have to accept that we are where we are. And I think it goes back to what you're saying, like things usually have to get really bad before people turn all the way up. And a lot of things about, like, when you study those slave rebellions, you look at the conditions that were happening right before them. Slavery was losing its economic viability in those times, like around the 1800s, early 1800s. Like the price of cotton on all that stuff was dropping, getting competitive. And so what you had is a lot of plantation owners who were not feeding their slaves. Like they were they're enslaved people. They were at the point where, like how they threw us off the ships, they were looking at us as disposable in that way. And so I think it says a lot about us. It's like, if we're not close to the brink of death, we just don't turn up. And I don't know if that's a thing about Black people or if that's a human thing, but that's just kind of facts. And a lot of us do not see ourselves close to death. I understand that there's a younger generation. There's a lot of people who go through a season in their life where they're, you hear a lot of young people be like, I didn't know I was going to live this long. I thought I was going to die. But they are not a highly organized group of people. And so that's the thing. You don't have a highly organized group of people that feels like death is imminent.
I think you 100% correct on that. And I think also, as I know we got the Harriet Tubman video that we're going to probably miss, or we might be able to get that in there. We have a little bit of time we can go over. But I think you hit it on a point when you said that the cotton, it came to a point where slavery wasn't productive anymore, right? But now we're in this reverse part of this American 2020 right now, where we're going reverse. Is coming back, right? Because oil is going away, right? Our American dollar is based on oil. With all of the green energy going on, right? Tesla, solar panels, everything's going green, right? To leverage the dollar off of oil is going away, right? So connections to community, allies across the world is changing, right? As you become an independent, right? Robotics, technology is now pushing us into a whole nother realm. So again, with 40 million people out of work, 12 million people next week losing unemployment benefit because our political people are playing politics. We all know when it comes to our kids, our family, when your back is against the wall, it's survival. How close are we there? And we also hear in our government saying they're going to shut down again for possibly another 6 weeks. How close to reality as Black and brown people are we getting there? We have brown people, kids in cages across this country, people being deported, Black people, just, it's bad right now, right? And one of your comments you put on there, slavery just ain't a sin, it's a state of war. So I ask this to you guys right now, given where we are, this climate of uncertainty with the transition of power, where the realistic of where we going as a country, avoiding the dollar, getting away from the oil of the dollar. They're still trying to figure out how are we going to base the American dollar, right? The Treasury is taking the American dollar and trying to get it into the digital cryptocurrency. The effect that is going to have on our people, what do you guys see coming? Because I see red all in front of me. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel like people say, John, what's your blessing? My blessing that the higher spirit gave me was the vision to see red ahead. Because it's only way. It's coming. You know, and this is why I know our people is not conscious and not woke. I went to the grocery store the other day, and the young sister in there, she's at the counter. She's like, hey, sir, you could just go over there to self-checkout. It's faster than this line that I'm in. I said, young lady, if I go to self-checkout, that's one step closer to you not having a job. You should want me in your line because this computer now is going to take your job. With the transition of the Treasury transitioning the dollar into cryptocurrency, into digital currency, we see our banks going away. You can't even really go into a bank now. Everything is direct deposit. Like these jobs is going away. So the pot is getting tight, and we understand pressure. As things start to close in, pressure is going to erupt, and I see red ahead. People like me, I'm too radical. But I think that was very, very, very heartfelt, you know. It got my blood pumping.
You know,
Violence without a cause is brutality.
Yeah, it speaks to what you were just saying before we played that clip. You know, foreseeing what's to come. You know, the art of war it strengthens and through government. You see what's about to happen. You know, it encompasses it very well.
Yeah, and then I think what gets me just every time about that clip is how grounded and clear Harriet Tubman's character was about the fact that she wasn't living. You know what I mean? And she was like, I want to live, and this is not living. And it made me think about what you said. I'm gonna keep going back to this about how satisfied we've become with alleviating the suffering at the sacrifice of really living. And so when we talk about, and I don't even think this just applies to Black people, I think it particularly applies to us because we experience oppression disproportionately in this country. But we've become satisfied with alleviating suffering. And how do we get back to our desire to live? Because throughout this conversation, we've been talking a lot about how a lot of, you know, these revolutionaries, these leaders, they knew they were going to die. They were like committed to their death. And what I think is very interesting about Harriet Tubman, and, you know, I don't want to make it a gender thing, but I wonder sometimes because you always hear men talk about, we ready to die, we gonna die. And, you know, I've been being in these circles for so many years. When I'm in circles with women, it's always more about like, how can we live? How can we preserve life? Like, I don't know if it's being mothers, having babies. I don't know. Like, you know, I'm not trying to get into no weird gender stuff. So, you know, don't judge me, whoever's listening out there. We can have a conversation offline. I'll be more than happy to have it. But whatever, not in a disrespectful way, whatever. But, you know, and I understand, but moving on, whatever. I can't help. I love the way she said it because we're also clear that Harriet Tubman risked her life, that there's no question about it. And she's so clear in that speech about, and I want to live. And the only way I'm really going to live is by participating in this war, is to one, recognize I'm in a state of war, and two, beating back. And I think the real question that we're talking about is how do we get our people there? How do we get our people to one, realize the condition they're in, and then commit or to revive that will to live and not just alleviate pain?
I think the majority of our people, unfortunately, we got to get hit upside our head to figure it out, you know. But, you know, when she said that war, like I understood. And our community, our people got to understand we got to be willing to die for a better future for our kids, our grandkids, or for a future ahead of us. But I mean, look at the conditions we living in now. There's nothing left but war. We have the highest impoverished people, the highest health disparities, the highest jobless, the highest incarcerated. Like, we not living good. Like, we're not living good. So if they want to fake put out, and I hear this all the time, oh, you got LeBron James, you have this rapper. Like, that people is not living good, man. Our people is not living good.
Facts.
I just fed the homeless out there. I was so emotionally in tears, like after Thursday, just seeing all of the kids. Like, I do this all the time, and it's like, yeah, there's kids, but this year, especially, it seemed like it was just way too many kids. People are starving. You selfish people out there who think it's not real because you got a job, because you're paying your bills. Our people are struggling out here. We are impacted right now financially. So all I see is red.
And to substantiate your point, like we would, if we would have had more time, showed the clip from Juneteenth, the reparations hearing in 2019 from Juneteenth. And I just want to say that.
How long is it? How long is it?
It's a few minutes.
Yeah, let's go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. And the reason why I'm going to pause and say that is because I'm with you. I think people are like, it's not real. But when you hear this testimony at a congressional hearing, it really paints the picture of how real it is.
Yeah, go ahead and do that.
To understand.
See yourself.
Welcome back to the mirror.
Welcome back to the mirror.
Welcome back.
Juneteenth, 2 years after the proclamation, Emancipation Proclamation, there were those Africans who did not have freedom until 1865. So let me begin and indicate to my friends who have expressed a variety of assessments of HR 40 and say that America is a place that welcomes the diversity of thought. We even welcome the diversity of thought among the multicolored chocolate people that are African Americans, descendants of African slaves. Let me be very clear. It is only this group, even though they attempted to enslave Native Americans, it is only this group that can singularly claim to have been slaves under the auspices, the institution, and leadership of the United States government. And so HR 40 is in fact the response of the United States of America long overdue. Slavery is the original sin. Slavery has never received an apology. This commission would be comprised of members selected by the President of the United States, the Speaker of the House, the leader, and of course, those who've been entrenched in this process. I spoke to John Conyers yesterday. I'm honored to have been given the opportunity to lead this bill. John Conyers said to move on and to lead on, and for us to take this forward. Thank you, Congressman John Conyers, for all that you have done. So let me share with you just a sense of what we face. Let me first of all say the number of Africans who died in the Middle Passage, over 2 million. Number of enslaved who died during slavery, first, second, and third generation, over 2.5 million. The transatlantic slave trade was the largest movement of people in history. Between 10 and 15 million Africans were forcibly transported across the Atlantic between 1500 and 1900. At least 2 million Africans, 10 to 15%, died in the infamous Middle Passage, as I said. Another 15 to 30% died during the march to or confinement along the coast. Altogether, for every 100 slaves who reached the New World, another 40 died in Africa or during the Middle Passage. Who has a history like that? Reparations and the idea of this commission should be welcomed by all Americans. For we are not asking one American to give one payment. What we're saying is it's the only way that slavery ended was a governmental action of the 13th Amendment, governmental action. And Reconstruction failed after 12 years because it was imploded by governmental people. And after Reconstruction, a reign of terror that had never been seen. The hanging fruit, the lynching, the oppression of voting, the tearing away of land, and the amazing concept of the continuing de jure and de facto impact of slavery today. 1 million African Americans are incarcerated. That is a continuing impact. The Black employment rate is 6.6%, in spite of what has been said currently, more than double the national unemployment rate. 31% of Black children live in poverty compared to 11% of white children. The national average is 18%, which suggests the percentage of Black children living in poverty is more than 150%, even in spite of the glorious overcoming of the talent that is part of our community, the scrapping together of making sure our children received education, the putting together something out of nothing. We still have been impacted. And only 57% of Black students have access to full range of math and science classes today. Black children were vaccinated at rates lower than white children. Education mobility has been limited. Black children represent 19% of the nation's preschool population, yet 47% of those receiving more than one out-of-school suspension. Black students are 2.3 times as likely to receive a referral to law enforcement. And we know the criminal justice system. So I conclude by these words. Black people in America are the descendants of Africans kidnapped and transported to the United States with the explicit complicity of the US government and every arm of the United States lawmaking and law enforcement infrastructure. The dehumanizing and atrocities of slavery were not isolated occurrences, but mandated by federal laws that were codified and enshrined in the Constitution. The role of the federal government in supporting the institution of slavery and subsequent discrimination directed against Blacks is an injustice that must be formally acknowledged and addressed.
Deep. That was very deep. I mean, that's real stuff. Yeah.
So what you said, 31% of children living in poverty. You know, you were just talking about you're seeing more kids. That's before the pandemic. That's 2019. You know that number has only increased. 31% of Black children living in poverty. That's
real.
Insane.
Insane. Go ahead, Asia. You want to say something?
Mm-hmm.
Looking at both Harriet Tubman and Miss Lee's speech, the one thing that I draw a comparison or realize is who are they talking to? Like, they're not, I mean, the message is, to me, the message it seemed like they were trying to get across is trying to get help from not just within us, but right? Because Harriet Tubman, I mean, again, I don't know if that's factual, like what that was, but you know, those were white individuals. She's trying to, you know, Miss Lee was talking to Congress, right? Trying to get help. So it's not just us fighting, we've got to get everybody else on board to help as well. Just like those rebellions showed, that it's not just us, that we need help because we aren't the ones in power. And how do we change that? But that's the one thing that struck me in both of those. It's you know, she's not talking to a bunch of us, she's talking to white people trying to get help, trying to say, we need to make these changes. You need to acknowledge that there's wrong out there, that we have been wrong, and to make those changes.
I think that's important, Asia. That's a great point you brought up. And I think it starts with the truth. We got to start telling the truth in America, these pagan holidays. We got to stop lying. That's the start, right? We got to start telling people the truth. Stop telling people Jesus was born on Christmas Day. We got to start telling the truth about our culture, our history, historically. I posted some videos inside our group about the Devil Bowl in Mississippi. Crazy stuff. A lot of information out there, but I think the way we start moving is telling the truth, and we have to be honest. America, we have a problem, and I only hope. I always say this at both sides of the conversation. We don't get into politics, but one thing that I learned while Trump was in office is Black people can unite when it's in their face, right? So the one thing that I thought with all the races, all the stuff that Trump was saying, it made people galvanize. And what I hope is, as we transition to Biden and Kamala Harris, that Black people and our allies don't take their foot off unifying and keeping the push going. That was the only thing that I worried about, because I know how our people is. Sometimes it could be like, hey, this guy who's being racist, doing all this divisive stuff is now gone. Now we have another president here. Everything is okay. I just hope we don't get to that place. Stay dangerous, my people. Before we end this, I got to let Natasha and Cairo say their last words. I don't mind us going over because I think this is important. I think this conversation today was very intentional and very impactful. I just want to commend both you ladies. This is something that we need in our schools. This is something we need in our communities. I'm glad you guys are doing this. We need more. It's been a long time coming. As we get into these holidays and we get into this lockdown and people are in the house, I hope we take the time to re-educate ourselves, get familiar what has taken place in the past and what is taking place today so that we can be better unified. As DeAnthony would say on here, radical unity is what we need. I seen him log in, and that's one thing that he promoted, radical unity, and I'm going to stick with that. I'm taking that. Radical unity is what we need in our community. Black and brown, we are the underdeserved. There's no better. We have been the toilet of the society. How do we unify together and keep pushing forward? So with that being said, kindly just want to say thank you, Natasha. Thank you, Cairo. This has been a blood pressure presentation for me. My blood is yoking. I'm ready to go do some tactical drills right now. I'm ready. But you guys, this was beautiful. So I'm gonna let you guys give your last word before we close this thing out. I really appreciate you guys coming. I think this is very amazing. I want to stay connected with you guys, our young people that we are mentoring. I'm going to definitely share these videos with them because it starts with our youth understanding where they come from, where we at, and where we going. So I'll turn it over to you guys.
On that note, if there are anybody out there who's paying attention, or if we can collaborate with you all, we do have different curriculums that we do. So we have this one in response to all the protesting that was happening. We did a Black History 101 for a lot of the young people who were hitting the streets. Like, y'all out there protesting stuff and you're not sure how we got here. So it was a good 90-minute presentation from enslavement to cultural appropriation. We took them through emancipation, civil rights, all of that, just to kind of draw those connections. So we're more than happy to collaborate with anybody listening that would like that presentation, this presentation. We did another one in partnership with Tongo on extrajudicial killings, and kind of connected to this conversation about how we are, in fact, extrajudicial killings are in fact genocide. And so we always talk about, we call it injustice, but, you know, in the spirit of that Harriet Tubman clip we showed, at what point do we call it war? And at what point do we call it genocide? And so we have these things. We'd love to put them out there and collaborate with anybody who's interested in, you know, taking part of some of our resources. And once again, thanks for having us.
Yeah, Natasha, could you put out you guys' website or your social media handles verbally so that they just know how to tap in or log in and check you guys out?
Yep, I'm gonna let Cairo do that.
And before Cairo,
oh wait, Cairo, you're on mute.
You're on mute, your mic. But
oh yeah, I was gonna say we tag team on this, so we know our role. So yes, I'll take it from here, Tosh.
But before you go, our Niners just won, so I got to give a shout out to our Niner fans. We just won. Come on now.
That's what's up. So for We Remember, go ahead. You can catch us on our website, weremember2019.org, Instagram, we_re_member, or Facebook, We Remember 2019. We do appreciate you guys having us and hosting us. Really definitely enjoy the conversation. We didn't get through the whole thing, but what's fun from this was good dialogue. And so we do appreciate you guys for hosting us.
Go ahead, Asia.
Well, thank you so much. I really did enjoy the conversation. And Natasha, we can't wait to see you on Tuesday on our Hidden Gem segment. So I will let Mr. Henry close us out.
Well, I just want to say this has been very powerful and impactful. Thank our co-founder for being able to jump in for a second. It's always great when we have prayers being answered and his spirits is up because he came on today. And I know he's been trying to stay away from the social media and just focus on family. So just appreciate him coming on today, and continue to pray for him and his family. Pray for Jada as she's doing amazing things, about to make history for us. So, with that being said, I think these conversations is very important in our community. I think we need to continue to have these ongoing dialogues because it's very important. I mean, this creates healing. It also shake us up from being so used to just the everyday things. And these conversations open up a lot of deepness within our community and the pain. And I think that's what more of our mental health is, being able to be open, not to be judged, to be able to get it off of our chest. And conversations like this help get it off our chest. And I think it's amazing. And today, what you guys put on, I know we didn't get through all of it, but I think for the purpose of the people, it was designed to give them this. We are in a state of war, Black people. We must stay dangerous out here and be aware. The times are shifting. We must be we must pay attention to what's going on and get involved, get engaged. To unify, we have to be engaged. Hear both sides of the conversation. We believe in you can't lead the community if you don't feed the community with the 3-pack love, with food, with information and knowledge. And I think today you got a little bit of that. And we're going to continue to feed the community with information, because the more informed we are, the more intentional we could be, and the better changes that we can make to help push our community forward. With that being said, I want to thank everybody for participating. We will recirculate this video in the group because I know some people missed it for the game. I think we should take the time out to kind of go back over the conversation. A lot of key points. Natasha, Cairo put out some amazing gem points in there that we need to process that. And the slave rebellion, the uprising that's taking place right now, there's some comparisons. And we want to understand that this movement is happening for a reason. There's a good versus evil spirit out here in the world, and we're going on the good side, but we're going to stay ready and we're going to stay intentional. And like Asia said, this Tuesday coming up, please join us for our Hidden Gem segment where we highlight our business people and our leaders of the community that's doing amazing thing. And Natasha will be there. And I think we should try to get Cairo on as well. So we'll reach out to you as well, Cairo. I think it's important that both you guys be on this Tuesday, especially after this presentation. I know people are going to, after they watch this, it's just going to be like, wow. And thank you guys for creating an organization that is going to lead our people, because part of leadership is, like I said, that information that you guys are giving that to our young people, the amazing work that you're going on, the travels. I mean, it's just deep, man. And I definitely want to stay connected and figure out how I can help, definitely financially support to get our young people to go, because that's what we about here, both sides of the conversation, is making sure that we help with resources or whatever we could do to support our people in our Black and brown community. So that's deep. And then we're back this week with our Educational Thursdays. We have another amazing guest that's going to come up and present some amazing educational information on Thursday. Happy to be back in that rhyme. And then we'll be coming back to our Sunday conversation. We're getting ready for some important Sunday conversation that's coming up. We have our Black man. We're talking about Black fatherhood. We got District 6 Supervisor coming up to talk about all the amazing things that he has going on and some of the things that's going on in San Francisco. We have some amazing conversations coming up. And then we're going to be talking about our human trafficking. We'll get to some of these real issues that's affecting our communities. And hopefully we can really be aware, to help make our community safer and better. So thank you guys for coming on. This is Both Sides of the Conversation. This is our Sunday conversation, another amazing conversation with some amazing guests. Thank you guys for coming on. We remember. I think that's a potent name, man. I got to keep saying that. We remember, because the more we remember, the more we could do. So we have to remember to move forward. So thank you guys for coming on. Thank you for participating in this Sunday's conversation. We will see you guys next week on Tuesday for our Hidden Gem Show. Thank you for tuning in. Have a blessed evening, everybody.